a war on Christmas. It is a war on Christ. Why do people object to the word Christmas? What's objectionable about the word Christmas? Why don't they want people to use the word Christmas? Because it's got the word Christ in it. I mean, that's it. If it had some other word in there, they could care less. So the fact that it's got the name of Christ in the word, the first 6 letters, are the whole problem. So we need to understand the stakes are very high here because this is a war on Christ. They have declared war, not on a season, not on a holiday. They have declared war on Jesus Christ himself. And they've said, look, his name is like pornography. Just like you can't have pornography out in the open, out in public, or you get in trouble, you can't mention his name. I mean, they're putting the name of Christ in the same category as porn, as something that has to be kept in a brown paper wrapper. Now, back to the comments I was making about gay marriage, then we'll go to the phones, 888-589-8840. You know, the question that I raised is if the Supreme Court overturns DOMA, then that's the end of any pretense that we have a Republican form of government where we can enact legislation through our elected representatives. If they overturn Prop 8, that is the end of any pretense that we have any shred of democracy left in America, because DOMA was enacted overwhelmingly by our elected representatives, huge bipartisan majorities in the House and the Senate, signed by a Democrat. If that gets tossed into the landfill by the Supreme Court, then what is the point of having a Congress? There's no point. Let's just turn everything over to our black-robed overlords in the Supreme Court. And again, 7 million Californians went to the polls in 2008, said we want to elevate protection for natural marriage to our state constitution. If the Supreme Court dumps that in the landfill, that's the end of democracy. Democracy is where the people directly enact legislation. That's the only way you can amend the federal constitution. The people have to do that. It's not done through our elected representatives. They get the first crack at it. It's got to get through Congress before it gets to us. But it doesn't happen until the American people, in a direct expression of democracy as opposed to republicanism, go to the polls and amend our supreme legal document. Now, so that's the end of democracy. It's the end of republicanism if the Supreme Court overturns these two. Now, I'm optimistic. This is what I say in the column. I'm optimistic that the Supreme Court is going to recognize that if they overturn these things, what they will have done is they will have disenfranchised the entire United States of America. They will have disenfranchised the entire United States of America. Remember, there was a lot of controversy, a lot of conflict, I guess, over the whole issue of voter ID and photo ID at the polls. Can't have it. You're disenfranchising. You're trying to keep these people away from the polls. You don't want their votes to count. You don't want them to register. You want to keep them from being able to exercise their constitutional right to vote. Well, this is a worse form of disenfranchisement than anything that the Democrats are complaining about, because here'd be the Supreme Court saying, yeah, be very paternalistic, pat us on the head and say, yeah, we'll let you vote. We'll let you go ahead and do that, but then we get to decide whether your vote even counts. Now, can you imagine the uproar if that's what was going on in November? If the Republicans were saying, yeah, we're going to let everybody vote, but then we are going to decide whether their votes get counted or not. I mean, the outrage would be, but that's exactly what we'd have here, the disenfranchising of the entire United States of America. The Supreme Court would be saying to the American people, your votes just don't count. We don't care what the Constitution says. We don't care about the sacredness of the vote. We don't care about our constitutional form of government. We don't care about a Republican form of government that's guaranteed to us in the Constitution. We don't care about power belonging to the people. We don't even care about we the people. We don't care what you, the people, decide, because we, the judges, are going to make those decisions for you. If we want your opinion, we will give it to you. Now, this ought to be a slam dunk for John Roberts. He ought to vote. He ought to vote to uphold DOMA and Prop 8, because remember, he said with Obamacare, look, I have an obligation to find some way to uphold a law that's been passed through the democratic process. That's what he said. He said, look, I really don't, basically said, I don't like this thing, but I have a responsibility to find some way, no matter how inventive I've got to be, no matter how many contortions I've got to go through, no matter how much bending and twisting of the Constitution I've got to do, I've got to find some way to uphold this, because that's my job, to find a way to uphold a law that's been passed through a democratic process. Well, if he did that with Obamacare, then this will be a slam dunk, because he'll have all sorts of reasons to uphold the laws of nature and nature's God, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the history of American jurisprudence, the history of American law, biology, genetics, psychology, social research, all of it supporting the wisdom of defining marriage as one man, one woman. So it ought to be a slam dunk for him unless he was lying to us about why he supported Obamacare. If it was all just a political thing for him and he told us it wasn't, that it was about constitutional principle, if he was lying to us, well, then who knows what he'll do. In fact, we'll have a way to test it. If he's just a political animal or whether he is a judge and that neutral umpire that he always told us about. Now, Kennedy's going to be the swing vote here. So again, we're going to be in this absurd place. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, this is an absurd place, absolutely absurd place to be, where one individual who wears a black robe is going to decide public policy on marriage and the family for 320 million people. That's absurd. That's what a dictator does. That's what a monarch does. That's what a king does. But that's the position that Anthony Kennedy is in. He's going to be the one guy. It's going to be 5-4 for natural marriage or 5-4 for sodomy-based marriage, no in-between ground, and Anthony Kennedy is going to be the guy that decides which way the thing goes. And Von Walker, the guy that wrote the federal opinion that overturned Prop 8 in California, he actually went to Anthony Kennedy's ruling in Lawrence v. Texas. Kennedy wrote the majority opinion, overturned Texas's sodomy law, basically vacated all sodomy laws in all 50 states. And he just copied and pasted words from Anthony Kennedy's ruling in his ruling on Prop 8 because he's trying to appeal to Anthony Kennedy. Basically, you got a campaign right now for one vote, and that's the vote of Anthony Kennedy. So again, just absolutely absurd. Supreme Court, I mean, they're actually contemplating disenfranchising the entire United States of America, and we're left this ridiculous place where one person, one individual, is going to decide marriage policy for 320 million Americans. Absolutely absurd, unconscionable, and inexcusable. This is not the country that the founders created for us. Well, let's go to the phones. Let us, and the question here is, should we keep fighting to protect natural marriage? Or should you do as other organizations have done, just capitulate, roll over, give it up? Everybody supports natural marriage is old. They're dying away. We got to accept reality. No point in even fighting the good fight any longer. Let's go to Ann in Palestine, Texas. Ann, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, I thought I had my thoughts all organized, but since I got through, I've been listening to you, and you have so many good points. Oh, my gosh. I'm 65,
mm-hmm.
and I believe we should stay in the fight, but however, there's a point at which we must relax and unload this burden onto Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
He has already done the work for us, the fight for us, and if we don't completely trust him with ourselves and our country, we don't have a fighting chance, and we might as well roll over.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I agree with you, Ann, that we have to pray. I mean, that is always job one. But, you know, there are times, I mean, most of the time what God says is, okay, now that you've prayed, I want you to pick up your sword.
Uh-huh.
I'm not gonna go and fight this battle instead of you. I will fight it with you. I will fight it through you. I will fight it on your behalf. But you have to pick up the sword and head to the front lines. You've prayed. You've worshiped me. That's great. I hear those prayers. Now I'm going to infuse your efforts with strength. But you're not going to win this battle by just by praying and praising me. You've got, at some point, you've got to pick up a sword and get to the front lines.
Well, and I believe that, of course, we should be teaching our children and making sure our children's children hear truth in all of this. And
well, let me ask you just one last question, Ann, before I let you go. I got other callers.
Okay.
But you're 65. Are you more conservative at age 65 than you were at age 25?
Yes.
And see that,
and I was very conservative then too.
But see, that's the interesting thing to me, because I think that's the answer to all this business about the youth are gone, the millennials are gone, the 18 to 29s are gone, we'll never get them back, they're gone on marriage. Is that's when they're the least mature, have the least life experience, the least wisdom, and most people become more conservative as they grow older, just like you did, just like I have. And so to me, it's just silly to say, well, because 22-year-old people think gay marriage is okay, we got to let that dictate policy for the smarter, wiser, more experienced, more mature people in our culture. All right, Ann, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's grab a call from Edward in Paris, Tennessee. Edward, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Brian. I've been studying through Isaiah, and your opening just reminded me of Isaiah chapter 6.
Uh-huh.
And when Isaiah is called, he's told he's going to a stubborn and rebellious people, and his question to the Lord is, how long? And the answer that God gives him basically is, you just keep doing it. And so when it comes time to fight against things that are immoral, we just need to keep doing it. We never give up.
All right, Edward, listen, that's a great word, and it reminds me, and I appreciate that call, Edward, because it reminds me of something. I've been in Isaiah also. It reminds me of something I read over the weekend in Isaiah 42. This is terrific. This is a servant psalm, the chosen servant of God, Psalm 42, verses 1 through 4. There, Isaiah says, "Behold my servant whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights." So this is referring to the Messiah, referring to Christ. This is a messianic psalm. And here's what the prophet, God through the prophet, says about the Messiah, about the Christ. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth. Let me repeat. This is the word God speaking about Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth. Now, grow faint, be discouraged, that indicates he's going to be tempted to do it at times. It's going to seem like the battle's not worth it. But here's my point. If God is not going to give up, if Christ is not going to give up, how can we give up?